grammatike techne, grammar hypotaktike increases, the subjunctive mood, intro and forms. In this lesson we'll cover an overview of the subjunctive, as well as the morphology of the subjunctive. The hypotaktike, the subjunctive, is formed by lengthening the thematic vowel to eta or omega as needed. So the thematic vowel, typically omicron or epsilon, becomes omega or eta. The hypotaktike, the subjunctive, generally indicates an irrealis state of affairs. That is, it does not indicate something that is or is not the case, that's what the indicative does, but something that may be the case, may come to be the case, that the speaker wants to occur or fears might occur and hopes that it doesn't. So it's about things that may or might occur, generally speaking. However, rather than try to continually refer to an abstract idea of the mood, that is, what is the subjunctive, it's generally better to consider the hypotaktike as a bundle of particular usages. Think of it as a mood that does a number of things in the Greek language and try and get a handle on the way it does those different things. Firstly, the hypotaktike has a number of uses in main clauses. In the first person, to express something the speaker wants to take place. People often call this the hortatory subjunctive. In English, let's go to the beach. Here I am encouraging myself and others in a course of action. In the first person, also to express doubt about a future action. This is called a deliberative or dubitative subjunctive. Should I study Greek? In the second, or sometimes the third person, to express something the speaker does not want another person to do. This is called the prohibitive subjunctive. It typically only occurs with the aorist. Don't do that. One way to express this is with the subjunctive. You shall not do that. Furthermore, the hypotaktike is also used in subordinate clauses. In fact, this is where it derives its name, hypotaktike, the subordinated mood. Here we see the primary categories in which it is used in Greek. Firstly, in purpose clauses, that is, in order to do something. Secondly, we see it in temporal clauses, that is, referring to the future, to habitual situations, or to generic occurrences, when or whenever. Similarly, conditional clauses referring to future or habitual fulfillment, if ever. We'll cover these in more detail in coming lectures. Now we turn to subjunctive forms. Because the hypotaktike is a mood, we find aspect forms, not tense forms. Thus, a verb typically has a present or an imperfective subjunctive, an aorist, that is a perfective subjunctive, and a perfect, a completive, or even a resultative subjunctive. We'll deal with the perfect further on in our materials. There is no future subjunctive. So unlike the optative, which does have a future, there is no future subjunctive. And when we get to the forms themselves, you'll see also why. Because it is not an indicative mood, there is no augment. So here we have the forms for our very regular luo in the NS dos, and we have both the energetike and the mese. So let me walk you through what's happening here. In 4 columns, we have the indicative, oristike, and then the hypotaktike, active on the left, and then middle on the right. You can see that some forms overlap. For example, the first person singular, luo and luo. They are exactly the same. Only context will tell you whether the hypotaktike is intended. Other forms generally are indicated by the lengthening of the theme vowel. Luis becomes lues. Lui or lue becomes lue. Luomen becomes luomen. Luete, luete. Luusin, luosin. In the middle, similar things go on. Luomai becomes luomai. In the second person singular, lui or lue becomes lue, unambiguously lue. But this again means there is an overlap in forms between the indicative and the subjunctive. Context will tell us where a lue is subjunctive. For the others, the lengthening of the theme vowel tells us luete, luete, luometa, luometa, lueste, lueste, luante, luontai. Here I have briefly summarized what happens with contract verbs, contract vowels. So epsilon, when it meets the omega wins. Pileomen, pilomen. Pileis, piles. In the case of the alpha loses to omega, timaomen becomes timomen, and timaes becomes timas. In the case of the O, deloomen becomes omen, deloomen. Again, omega wins. And the omicron plus the eta, generally speaking, because the eta involves a subscript iota, becomes a diphthong, delois, delit. And this plays out, the same principles play out across all the forms, and here I've just given you example forms. And again, it does mean that some forms overlap with their indicative counterparts. Now we come to the aoristos, the aorist. The aorist is marked by the sigma here because it is a sigmatic aorist. Luo becomes elusa. When we come to the hypotactike, we lose the augment, we have the sigma, and then we have endings that are the same as the present endings we just saw. There is no alpha throughout this system. And so some of these endings now look like futures. Luso looks like a future. Luce, third person, looks like it could be the future second person middle. However, there is no future subjunctive, so there's no confusion there. So the sigma here is marking the aorist only. Luso, luces, luce, lusomen, lucete, lusosin. Again, when we come to the middle, no presence of the alpha. Sigma is marking our aspect, but then we're adding on the o or the e lengthened forms to mark the subjunctive, and then our primary endings. Primary endings. Not secondary endings because we're no longer in the past. So primary middle endings. Lusomai, luce, lucetai, lusometa, luceste, lusontai. Here again we have an aoristos. Meno becomes emena in the aoristos. So we've got a liquid verb which would normally result in a change in both the future and in the aorist. Here the change is marked by the stem appearing slightly different. We've got a vowel change. What this does is, in the aorist aoristike, we don't get a sigma. We get a kind of a pseudo sigma. Emena. So the change in the vowel is because a sigma has dropped out. There's compensatory lengthening. And so this is kind of an irregular sigmatic aorist. Emena, emenas, emenen, emenamen, emenete, emena. What this means is in the hypotactike, we take that same stem minus the augment and we use it, and then we go mino, mines, mine, minomen, minete, minosin. We add on the same standard hypotactike endings. No sigma, no alpha here. Same thing in the middle over on the right. Minomai, mine, minetai, minometa, mineste, minontai. Primary endings, primary middle endings, the altered stem for the aoristos, no sigma, no alpha. When we come to a verb where the aoristos has a total stem change, pipto becomes epison. Just as we keep the different stem and use primary endings, for example, epison, epises, episen, episomet, episete, epison, we keep the same aorist stem and we add those regular endings that we're now becoming very familiar with. Peso, peses, pese, pesomen, pesete, pesosin. And similarly in the middle, we use the primary endings. Pesomai, or pesome, pese, pesetai, pesometa, peseste, pesontai. What happens then when we come to a fully root aorist? Baino, which becomes even. Well, here we take the stem, be, the veta, and we remove everything, and we simply add on the endings. Vo, ves, ve, boben, bete, bosin. We also find the aorist in the middle in theta or eta, or theta eta. Eluten, here we no augment, So our aorist stem, our aorist middle stem in theta eta becomes our aorist middle stem in theta, and then we add on the same endings with no extra eta, just the lengthened theme vowel and the endings. Luto, lutes, lute, lutomen, lutete, lutosin. This is the same case even when there is no theta. Efanen, stem, fan. Fano, fenes, fane, fanomen, fanete, fanosin. So those middle passive endings do not appear as middle passive endings. We take the middle passive stem, the mese is theta eta stem, and we add on primary active looking endings. That's the conclusion for this introduction to the hypotactic enthesis and forms. In our next set of materials, we'll look at how the hypotactic is used in context.